Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. We'll start off this session by taking up the first item of this segment, and which is the Quran. So the Quranic verse that we are going to study today is from Surah Shura, which is the 42nd surah of the Quran, and verses 40 to 43 will be under discussion. I'm just going to read out first the text and translation. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا فَمَنْ عَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ وَلَمَنِ انتَصَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِم مِّن سَبِيلٍ إِنَّمَا السَّبِيلُ على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم ولمن صبر وغفر إن ذلك لمن عزم الأمور. And the revenge of an evil is an evil equal to it. Yet he who forgave and reconciled, his reward rests with God. Indeed, he does not like wrongdoers. And those who took revenge after they were oppressed, but then there is no blame on them. The blame is only on them who oppress people and are rebellious in the land without justification. It is for these people for whom there is a grievous penalty. And indeed, he who exercised restraint and forgave, then this is from among the matters of resolve. So as you can see that these are some very fundamental verses, and they provide some very basic guidance in our everyday affairs. There are instances in which we face rivalry. There are instances in which we face animosity. We face in the heat of the moment. We find that people are up in a situation that they would try to usurp our rights, that they would like to harm us, and this situation is something that people face quite often in this society. So, of course, one of the directives which the Quran has given, and which stands at the pinnacle of such a situation, is that if someone wrongs you, then the best way is to forgive that person for that wrong, and to have a very large heart and be magnanimous. But then the Quran says that this is not always possible, and also there is a second option, and that is if someone does evil to you, you are authorized to pay back in equal coins. And therefore, if you do so, this is perfectly okay. But as the Quran says, that a person who does not take revenge, and instead of taking revenge, actually the words of the Quran are فَمَنْ عَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ. He who forgave and reconciled, his reward rests with God. فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, which means that if a person had this magnanimity and this large-heartedness in him to forgive people for their mistakes that they committed against him, and at the same time he did not take revenge as a result, then such is his reward, that the Almighty says فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, that his reward rests with God. And this is something which has a huge glad tiding for every person who has been wronged, that if he forgives people for their wrongdoing, then remember, none other but God is going to reward him for that. So فَمَنْ عَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. So he who forgave and reconciled, his reward rests with God. وَلَمَنْ انْتَصَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِم مِّن سَبِيلٍ. And before these verses we find the Almighty saying إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ, that he does not like those people who do wrong, who are wrongdoers, who commit oppression, who are oppressive on other people. So this is something that all of us, through our innate guidance, we know very well, that as far as committing harm to other people is concerned, as far as wronging them is concerned, this is something which is just not on. And if someone does so, we have been given this authority and this opportunity to take the same amount of revenge. And of course, this does mean that the revenge inflicted should not be above and beyond the wrong one has suffered. And this especially has special relevance, I would say, that in the Arabian society in which the Quran was being revealed, this system of vengeance and revenge, it went a long way. And if people were harmed in some way, they would end up inflicting more harm on the wrongdoer, and this would then, of course, start a chain reaction in which a series of battles and a series of conflicts and episodes of vengeance would be worked up, and for many decades and at times centuries, tribes would engage in permanent and perpetual war. But here the Quran has given Muslims this very beautiful guidance that if they forgive, then their reward rests with God, because this forgiveness, of course, would mean that they have exercised restraint, and at the same time accepted very wholeheartedly that yes, someone has done wrong and they are not going to take revenge. And if this is adopted, as we have seen in history a number of times, that it stops that series of vengeance and revenge battles and conflicts that have raged in this world. So the words go on to say, وَلَمَنِ انْتَصَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِم مِّن سَبِيلٍ. And those who took revenge after they were oppressed, then there is no blame on them. So this has a special significance as well. You see, it was thought that people who are religious should not take revenge and they should just forgive everything, and if they do so, then this would be a bad thing on their part. But the Quran here has said that if you take revenge, then there is no blame on such people, because all that they are doing is they are exacting an equal amount from the person who was the oppressor. And this does not amount to any form of oppression in itself. On the contrary, oppression is from people who had taken the initiative in wronging that person. So in the society of those days, people thought that, well, why should a person who is so religious, who is so pious, he should even think of revenge? But the Quran says, no, this is not the right way. Well, there are instances in which a person has to resort to this revenge because of the nature of the persecution, and at the same time also it is at times the crime committed is unforgivable. So it's not an act of oppression if you take revenge. The only thing is that it should not exceed the amount in proportion of the wrong that a person had suffered. So the Quran is absolutely clear that people who harm others, who wrong others, as the verse says, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, that for such people there is a grievous penalty in the next life. And on the other hand, وَلَمَنْ صَبَرَ وَغَفَرَ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. But those who exercise restraint and forgave, then this is of course something of a great undertaking, because it's not easy when you have been wronged, when your own self-esteem has been brutally sacrificed. It does take a lot of mettle. It does take a lot of courage to forgive people. Forgiveness is something which requires a lot of bravery on the part of the forgiver. But then this is a target that the Almighty has set before all of us. And we do hope and pray that whenever we are in such a situation, we do choose this highest position in which we are able to forgive the offender. And as a result of that, the biggest thing that might happen is that because of this moral superiority or moral victory, that person is also reformed from inside. Now, folks, we are now going to go to the next segment of our study circle, which is Hadith. We are going to study a Hadith of the Prophet, and this is a Hadith from Al-Jami Sahih of Imam Muslim. And the words are, an Abi Hurayrata قال قال رجل يا رسول الله من أحق الناس بحسن الصحبة قال أمك ثم أمك ثم أمك ثم أبوك ثم أدناك أدناك. So Abu Huraira said, a person asked, O Messenger of God, who amongst people is the most deserving of my good treatment? He replied, your mother. Then again replied, your mother. And a third time he also said, your mother. And the fourth time he said, then your father. And then your nearest relatives according to the order of nearness. So the more the nearer person, the more should be your kindness to that person. But needless to say, the right of the mother is underscored here, and the way it has been underscored is that the mother has 3 times more right on a son or a daughter than the father himself. And this is quite understandable, dear listeners, because of the fact that the amount of suffering and the amount of sacrifice which a mother undergoes far exceeds the father. A mother, first of all, carries in her womb for 9 months, and during that time she is of course burdened, and she's of course pushed to her ultimate limits. And then at the time of childbirth as well, it's a life and death situation on most occasions, and she goes through that too. And thirdly, she is also the person who suckles the young child. So these are 3 things which the father he does not undertake or undergo. So it does seem very, very appropriate, the Prophet pointing this out in this narrative, that your mother has 3 rights, thrice those rights as the father. And this also shows the great amount of respect as we all must have for our parents. We know that it is needless to say that parents command respect. Of course, this is something which is inbuilt. It is something that we have in our own self, but it still needs to be reminded, because at times this is something that we tend to overlook. It tends to elude us. But the Prophet in such sublime words has said that, well, the right of your mother is such that you must see that the amount of sacrifice and difficulty she has put herself into is such that you just cannot repay her. It's simply out of the question. But what you can do is be kind, be affectionate, and also realize that this is something which the Almighty, in His grand scheme of things, has sanctioned in a way that the unit and the system of the family, when it comes into being, it has to come into being with the union of a father and a mother. And in this regard, the mother has this special standing. Needless to say that at times parents themselves don't realize that they become oppressive to their children. They persecute. I mean, I would not say persecute them, but I would say that they will certainly impose themselves in such a vehement manner that it does damage the psyche of the children. So on the one hand, yes, children have to be extremely respectful towards their parents, and as this narrative also says, that in the extended family as well. But on the other hand, parents too, they must also realize this fact that as far as their life is concerned, as far as their connection with their children is concerned, they have to teach their children as best as they can, but ultimately they must not enforce their own will on their children. Children, I'm talking about grown-up children, once they enter into mature age, into grown-up age, now it is their life that needs to be understood, and they must be given this freedom and leverage. Yes, parents can share their experience, they can be very good advisors, but they have to realize that as far as forcing their own decision on their children is concerned, this is something which the Almighty has not allowed. And as I have said in some of our other sessions, that this amounts to actually a violation of human rights, because as a human being, as an adult human being, every person has been invested with this right of making decisions on his or her own discretion. Let us now move on to the third segment of our study circle, and this is Bible verse of the day. Today we are going to study verses 41 to 44 from chapter number 12 of the Gospel of Mark. And he, Jesus, took a seat by the place where the money was kept, and saw how people put money into the boxes. And a number who had wealth put in much. And there came a poor widow, and she put in 2 little bits of money, which make a farthing. And he made his disciples come to him, and said to them, Truly, I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are putting money into the box, because they all puts in it something out of what they had no need for. But she out of her own need put all that she had. She out of her own need put in all she had, even all her living. So this is something which is very extraordinary, which Jesus, in his very sublime style, as we see how subtly and how eloquently he uses situations, he uses incidents, everyday life incidents, and make them a means of teaching his disciples. And as you can see from this incident, that people were filling the coffers, they were filling a box, like a money box that was meant for charity. And on most occasions, people were putting in the spare money that they had. But Jesus pointed out to a widow, and she was not just putting her spare money, she was actually putting the money that she needed. And she was not shying away even if she had little. And in fact, she was in fact displaying a tremendous amount of selflessness while doing so. And that is precisely what Jesus has said here. He said that, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are putting money into the box. So if you put all those people together who are contributing for charity, Prophet Jesus says that, well, if they are enumerated on the one hand, and the money put in by the widow on the other hand, then the poor widow will still outweigh them, because she gave the money what she required, what she had for her needs, and the rest they were giving what they did not require, and it was spare for them. This is the spirit, my dear viewers, that we all need to understand, that there are times in this world, in this temporary world, in this transient world, when you have to realize that it's not just the assets and the wealth and the things that we possess which are going to make any difference in our lives. It's basically what we do for others is going to be stored up in heavens and in the exchequer of God, and going to be returned to us manyfold. So let us find solace and refuge in thinking about others, in spending for them, even if we have little, even if we have small. You'll find divine scriptures speaking of this selflessness in such lofty words. On one occasion, the Quran has also said that the highest form of charity is one in which you give in spite of being in need. So the Quran says, "Yusiruna ala anfusihim walau kana bihim khasasa." Such are these noble people that in spite of being in need of the money they might be spending, they give preference, priority to other people. And this is the spirit. It's undoubtedly something of a tall order. But then if you have that connection with God, if you feel that you're living in this world and you're going to reap some rewards in the hereafter, this passion, this feeling gives you the power to spend on other people and to always think about their needs, always put their needs before our own needs, and at the same time realize that if we have been blessed by the Almighty, we were not entitled to these blessings. It's just that the Almighty has chosen us to see whether what we do with these blessings. And the best way to deal with these blessings, to help with these blessings, is to share them in a very wide way to all the people who might be around us. And for that, we need to have that eye. We need to have that ear in which we are able to spot people who are in need. And as Jesus has said, that look, if you do so, then your reward is something that you would not even imagine that's going to come from God. And in this particular area, it is something of a guidance in such a lofty way that He has provided us. And He has repeatedly, I mean, if you study the Bible, if you study the Gospels, there are so many occasions in which He uses these everyday incidents, these happenings, to teach people, to open the door to reality to people. And you can see that this is something that we can also do. If we have eyes, if we have discerning eyes, if we have keen eyes, we can learn these lessons from people around us, people who are unsung heroes, people who might not be prominent, but the way and the mannerism in which they live life, in which they discharge their duties, makes them outstanding exponents of humanity. So now we come to the end of our third segment of our study circle, and we are now going to have a discussion on a topic, and which is going to be moderated. So the topic today is the advantages and the disadvantages of social media. Of course, in this era in which there is this explosion, this social media explosion, as people say, knowledge explosion, in which we are living through apps, we are living through our phone. A phone has become a home to us. A phone has become an office to us. We even use it in our bathrooms. We take it along with us wherever we go. It's like a inseparable part of our existence. So in this background, we must also take stock of the situation and see what are the advantages and disadvantages of social media. So over to you, Mariam, if you are there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I'll start off the discussion. So for me, what I really like about social media is that you are exposed to different perspectives from all kinds of people, and that really helps you broaden your ideas. And if you have any preconceived notions, or if you want to learn about something new, you can really, really do that there. But the one con to this becomes that a lot of people stay stuck to their bubble that they're comfortable with. And so it could end up, being the complete opposite, where you're just in a sort of an echo chamber where you're hearing the same perspective that you'd like to hear. And so you don't end up learning something new. So it could go both ways. And I think, like a lot of things with social media, it really depends on how you're using it, because at the end of the day, it's an important tool to have. And it depends on the user.
Okay, that is fine. But one thing that we have often seen is that it is very, very addictive. And the way things are progressing with the introduction of ChatGPT and then AI stepping in, we are bound to have a tremendous impetus in the nature of social interaction. And now holograms and things like image travel have become so possible a reality that the more we develop these apps and these instruments of social media, the more involved we are going to get in them, which has a telling effect on human relations, I would say. So this is one area that has to be looked into.
In terms of ChatGPT, I could say that I've found it a useful tool sometimes in terms of searching for some information, and also, if you want to start brainstorming about writing some sentences, it really helps you get over the writer's block. As long as obviously you're not copy pasting, that'd be plagiarism, but you're
Right.
changing around some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a fun tool if used properly, or
Mm-hmm.
if used not properly, then some students, they don't end up learning anything. So I think instead of there was a time where some universities were trying to put a sort of a stop, or like stopping their students from using it, but it could do more harm than good, because it's hard to catch unless you have some other specific tools to catch people using ChatGPT or other AIs. So I think it's more important to learn how to use it.
It
There's
does. It's
somebody,
of course. Please go ahead.
there's someone in the comments who said that ChatGPT is reducing creativity.
Is it?
Well,
Because ChatGPT itself is the product of creativity.
Thank you. I'd like to comment on the same point that ChatGPT might reduce creativity, because, as for example, I like to do poetries all the time. And I was sitting here with my friend and I was showing her a poem or a piece of novel that I was working on. And she said, it's not a big deal. She wrote in ChatGPT and she wrote some lines of her thought that, can you create me a poem having these points? And it created for her. And it was literally free of any plagiarism. And at that time, I just felt that, oh my God, I think maybe not only it's reducing creativity, but it's also lessening the worth of original work, because it kind of is good in producing, being an AI on generating better stuff than we do, as better poems or better stories and stuff.
Right. So that is also understandable that, although it doesn't plagiarize, because of the fact that ChatGPT itself is a work of creativity and it has its own creativity as well. So it has started to create things that you just cannot imagine. And at times what it comes up with is so amazing, it's so astonishing that you start to wonder that how on earth is this possible? So yes, I think this ChatGPT is something which, on the one hand, it might reduce your creativity because you just become addictive to it. You think that instead of thinking yourself, all that you need to do is you feed the pointers and it'll come up with something creative itself. But then, as I said, on the other hand, if you look at some of the other areas in which speed, efficiency, time become factors of consideration, it might be extremely helpful also. And as we can see that this is just the beginning. I mean, we are just at the very beginning, very start of this happening, and God knows where we're going to end. But the real thing, I think, which we need to re-evaluate maybe and revisit, is the lack of human element which the social media, whatever the form we talk about, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or so many other things like TikTok, etc. It is subtracting that human connection, which at times is very telling. And you're sitting in the same room, have you gone to visit someone, maybe an elderly person, to inquire about that person's health, and you end up concentrating more on your phone, and maybe the person who is sick also, he or she's also concentrating more on the phone, and you're sitting right across one another. So yes, it becomes comical as well at times. But I think this is something as if you have found a treasure or something which is super exciting, and you become so involved in that you just tend to forget normal human behavior and normal human relation, and this does happen. So I think that with time this might normalize. Otherwise, at a very earlier age, when our children are growing up, at a very earlier age, like maybe 2 years or 3 years, it is at this age that they start picking up these gadgets and just start typing on them, and they become gadget savvy. So I think maybe this is the time in which we need to sort of make them realize that yes, this is part of our lives. It has a lot of advantages, but it has to be used prudently. Although, as I said, prudence doesn't come until you go to certain extremes. Only when then you realize that well, you're across the limits, and now you should go back. So I have just these mixed feelings. I cannot give you an exact maybe solution, but I do think that the biggest thing that we need to work on is this sacrifice that human relations have been made to suffer.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I'd like to comment on one aspect of ChatGPT. So all of these AI tools, they take existing information, whatever was fed to them, and then they string them together. And the creativity here is in terms of how they string those things, all that information together to make it sound very
Right.
human-like, but it's not actually creating any original work, or it's not thinking for itself. So I just wanted to add that there. Whereas humans,
Absolutely.
one
Yeah.
could argue.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, शुक्रिया। सोशल मीडिया के बारे में मैंने ये कहना था कि ज़्यादातर जो मैंने बात देखी है वो ये है कि बेपर्दगी बहुत हुई है। आप जिस तरह इस्तेमाल करें, इसमें कोई शक नहीं कि आप ज़िम्मेदार हैं कि क्या आप कर रहे हैं पीछे। लेकिन जिस चीज़ पे अल्लाह ताला ने पर्दा रखा हुआ था, छोटी सी चीज़ हो, वो भी आज आपको नज़र आती है। जैसे एक नॉर्मल सी बात है, नॉर्मल सा एक्शन है, और ये ऐसा फीलिंग होता है कि जो गलत भी है वो भी ठीक हो रहा है, और ज़्यादातर फिर इस तरह के रिएक्शन नज़र आते हैं बच्चों में कि वो वही काम करते हैं, वही बातें कहते हैं, और उनको ये भी नहीं महसूस होता कि क्या अच्छा है क्या नहीं। और ये है कि एक वक्त में ये था कि अगर अल्लाह ताला आप पे रहम करते थे कि आपकी गलती या एक ऐसा काम है जो सबको शाया नहीं होया सबके सामने, अब ऐसा है कि सबके सामने आ जाता है, तो इस पे थोड़ा सा सवालिया निशानी
Right.
है कि क्या वाकई ही चीज़ है या नहीं।
Actually, see, we do get your point, what you're saying, that it's the use of a thing which makes it questionable. So, just as these gadgets have tremendous advantages, benefits, their wrong use is going to inevitably lead us to great pitfalls. So, but the fact is that they are present in our environment in such a all-embracing way that if you start to check your children, maybe or youngsters, or impose restrictions, I do feel that this might not work, because how far you can go. It's like air that you breathe. It's so common. So I think maybe a better way out is to make them realize its harms and how it can afflict them. And after some trial and error, which they're going to do in any case, experimentation, if they make mistakes, they're going to realize themselves. So it does seem to me that when evil or when bad things they are selective. You have to choose between them. It's easy to control them. But when they are everywhere, they're like air to you. You have to breathe in and breathe out. Then it's become so difficult to impose restrictions. And perhaps in such a situation, a better alternative would be to create this awareness amongst our own selves in the first place, and of course amongst our children as well, that how these things can negatively affect our mental health. So you see, one important area that we need to always concentrate is this mental health issue. So addiction towards anything is going to severely affect our mental health, it's going to impair it. Also at the same time, responsibilities that might be imposed on us, they might tend to get neglected, and so on and so forth. So I think, making people aware of the harms, and especially when they themselves also experiment and they suffer these harms, perhaps that is how we human beings generally learn. It's not always that we learn from the mistakes of others. On most occasions, we make those mistakes and then we realize that, well, we should not repeat them. So yes, I do agree that it has caused such nuisance and has caused a lot of things that would be upsetting. But then I think the important way is to how to deal with this because you just cannot reverse the cycle. This time cycle is going to go on and on. In fact, it's going to increase. It's going to enhance in intensity. So I think that we, as parents, as elders, as responsible citizens of the globe, we need to devise strategies in which we are able to not only benefit from these advancements of science, I call it an advancement of science, but at the same time also protect ourselves from its evil effects.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Isabel Aisha Khalid, please go ahead.
Okay, so you said that how social media is deeply embedded and actually pretty much mummified all of our society. And then you also talked about mental illness and how we have to deal with them. So it just clicked into my mind as Snapchat is having a very wild use in Pakistan since the time we're exposed to it. And what I have seen with the passage of time, that instead of catching some maturity, especially in girls, they are going into more complex issues. Like nobody is ready to take a picture, in majority I'm speaking, with a simple camera unless it's too much outstanding. So how can we deal with such issues? As we can see, it's a lot, and we can just say by looking that okay, it's complex, that you're afraid to show your real face or the camera cannot picture it well, but actually I think it starts eating like the small termites, personality from inside, and weakens a person in which they can't even, they're not knowing, and their whole personality is trembling. So how can we fight this disease which is going on also together, all in all, in the society?
Yes, absolutely right. This is one of the biggest negativities which this thing is producing. That everything has become so superficial, and the outside looks they have replaced all values, and people don't pay attention to what a person is from inside, and all that comes into question and all that comes into discussion is one's physical appearance and how one should dress up, etc. And this is something which is, of course, quite a big trial, because the Almighty has not made every person pleasing in his or her looks, and people are all types. And this has caused a lot of mental health issues amongst boys and girls who might think that they don't have they don't have that appearance that some of the other people might have, and this has caused them to, this has brought them to limelight. Formerly they were hidden, they were, in the society, but now suddenly, because of the prominence of some beautiful faces, some of the people who don't have those faces or looks, they feel deprived, they feel depressed, and they feel that maybe God has been unkind to them. And as a result, what happens is that instead of concentrating on your own skill set, you concentrate more on your appearance and your outward look. My submission here would be that one of the counter measures that we can take is the one that I just suggested, and that is to always feel proud of the skill set that you have. So God has created people with different skill sets, and these skill sets are worth being proud of. You might have abilities in various affairs. You could be a good writer or a good singer or a good elocutor or a good speaker, good teacher, a person who is a philanthropist. There's so many aspects of a personality. So I think every person should concentrate on the points and the skills, I said, that he has or she has been given by God, and regard himself or herself to be a worthy individual who can contribute to the betterment of the society, and should not participate in this rat race which has started, and as I said, it is causing more harm, and people have gone to extremes. Like we have suicides, we have severe mental issues in which, because of these this stress on external appearance, a lot of people, they just tend to neglect a lot of other things that they might have as skills. But the skill which has now become so prominent, which is the outer appearance, maybe they don't have that. But the fact is that this causes a lot of frustration in them. So, as I said, concentration on one skill set, concentration on what good I can bring to the society. It's not always looks that are going to matter. It's how you fare in this world, how you bring happiness in this world, how you can contribute in the lives of other people, which matters. And the biggest happiness that comes our way is the happiness that you create by making other people happy. So I think by stressing out the fact that contribution in this world and having emphasis on our own skill set will bring that confidence, that self-esteem, which at times gets damaged because of this rat race, as I said.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the raised hands. A couple more points I'd like to add to the discussion. So, echoing what Isabel basically said about Snapchat, there is this huge problem of TikTok here in America where, teenagers are going sort of through the same thing, or younger adults in terms of TikTok. And like you said, focusing on skill set is very important. And I think one more thing to add to that is that your looks are not going to last. At some point, you're going to grow old and they're going to fade away. And that's true for everyone. So I think as you start aging, you start realizing those matters. And if you have, and if you're a parent or an elderly person who can guide the younger people and tell them that looks are temporary, but your skill sets and your knowledge and all that is permanent.
Right. Right.
So that could be
Absolutely.
a huge boost. One more thing I wanted to bring into discussion is the spread of misinformation through social media. So, how would you counteract that?
I think again, we have to be more self-reflective and self-accountability, as I would say. This is the one that checks us, and that is that you just cannot spread information which cannot be verified. So if social media is spreading information, the greatest impact which this has is that people tend to believe whatever comes their way, and they start discussing facts as if they have already happened, and the next thing that they know is it's just a fake thing that has come their way. So people have to be very cautious in catching information, in having it verified, and before reporting it to other people. So because time and again we have realized that fake news and incorrect facts, they just go out, and people just don't realize that how things are doctored, how they are made up, and a whole malicious propaganda is spread. In fact, this is something which political parties and social groups, they also use against one another. So we have to be cautious, because you see, it's difficult to advise other people. All that we need to do is perhaps advise our own self and be self-accountable in this matter, that, well, whatever information comes our way, we will only believe in it or maybe transmit it, if it of some consequence, when we have verifiable means, when we are able to know that, yes, this is something that we can trust. And until that, we will not be gullible, we will not just believe in whatever comes our way. So I think it's a question of setting right our own attitude. And if every person realizes this, then he or she at the end of the day is going to either suffer because of that wrong reporting, or be in peace because he or she would think that, well, things did come our way, but because we had no verifiable information, so okay, we're not just going to have an opinion, not form an opinion on the basis of it. I would say the best thing is that self-realization and sifting out attitude that we must possess. And you just cannot have that power to control social media. That's a huge thing, but you do have the power to control your own self.
Until then, we have a question of a participant who asked about Ahl Ta'if and how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he made a dua for them, and that then helped them prosper. Is this true?
Yes, it has been reported in books of Hadith and history that when he went there, he was persecuted, he was pelted upon with stones, he had blood running over his whole body, and in spite of getting angry and maybe saying that, well, oh God, destroy these people, he actually made these words, he actually supplicated before the Almighty that please don't destroy this nation, because from their loins another nation is going to come into being who's going to be more understanding. And at the same time, I think he also said that these people don't know me that well, and that is why they are behaving in this way. So I think that this is a golden example of the Prophet, in which instead of retaliating in the face of utmost persecution, he was much more concerned of the people who were inflicting this harm on them, and he was praying for them. And he knew that, well, because of the fact that they have been misinformed maybe, or they're not rightly behaving, one day they're going to change their attitude. And I think this happened. I mean, this was because of his patience and perseverance that the tide turned on them. And we find how vehemently they then later on sided with the Prophet.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Isabel Aisha Khalid, please go ahead.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So should I go one by one or just place them both together?
You
I
can
think
go
on
one
by one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is that there was a time when I accepted Christianity. And the reason was this, that the religion I knew was just, there was too much gymnastics done with it. And it was so much orthodox and it didn't make any sense to me before I knew Ghamidi Sahab. And what I felt is that God is more like a tyrant who is waiting to find a mistake in us and punish us for that. But when I studied the Bible and the Torah, I found out that God is very merciful. But later on, then, God bless Ghamidi Sahab, I came back to my religion. But there is a thing that still bugs me and I still feel too much lacking. And that is that in the Bible and in the Torah, God shows his love to the people who have believed as my firstborn, my chosen one, and so many more endless ways which calls the Israelites. But in the Quran, there's not so much of the expression, or maybe I can't perceive it, that maximum is ya ibadi or ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So is it that maybe God loved them more than us, or maybe giving them too much love didn't work out quite well, so God isn't doing that with us?
Well, you see, the message of all books of God has been the same ever since the inception of mankind, ever since Adam to Muhammad. All scriptures, we are told by the Quran, they have brought the same religion. Very minor differences in things that have taken place, and that too because of an evolution of societies and civilization. Otherwise, morals and faith articles, they have always been the same in these divine religions. And you'll find the Torah and the Quran similar in one aspect, and that is some harsh things are spoken. I mean, the Torah speaks of those harsh things regarding the Israelites, and the Quran actually recounts those. It charge sheets the Israelites and tells them that how they have misbehaved with their own prophet Moses, and how earlier on, even after the times of Abraham, how they did not carry on the mission that was given to them. They regard themselves to be chosen, but then they went to the other extreme and started to persecute other people. Yeah, and you find the Quran also replete with such instances in which the people of the book and the idolaters, they are taken to task. So I think what we need to understand is that mercy is present in both books of God, but as far as the harsh part of these books is concerned, it is basically directed to people against whom the Almighty had to set up a court of justice in this world. They had to be punished in this world. So we have been discussing this law of Itmamul Hujjah, or law of messengerhood, which is found in the Quran and in the Old Testament, which is the Torah, that people of the messengers of God, their foremost addressees, they are punished in this world for their wrongdoing and for their denial of the truth, because it is intentional. It is not out of any ignorance or any misinformation. So this intentional denial of the truth is punished in this world, and that punishment is going to continue in the hereafter as well. So because of the fact that the Quran basically deals with the idolaters and the people of the book, who are the opposing group or the opposing factions against the message of the Prophet, so it tells them that if you accept faith, because this is something that you had promised yourself, your own book bears witness to the fact that whenever the last prophet would come, you would profess faith and help him. Now that the last prophet has come, it's time for you to honor your promise. So if you do so, you'll be, of course, rewarded. And if you don't do so, then that promise of doom and destruction which was made in the Torah is going to continue. So because of the fact that the Quran is a book of this final report on the fact that how nations who intentionally deny God's prophets and messengers, they are taken to task, that you find such verses in the Quran as well. And as I said, if you read the Torah in more detail, you'll find those verses in them as well. And even in the Gospels, you'll find Jesus reprimanding the Romans of his times and how they had indulged in paganism and how they had at times just left the original guidance, and also reprimanded all the Israelites as well, that and he is reported to have said that he has come to complete the book and he has not come to revoke it. So it's just a question of having this background in mind, that all these books of God, they speak of God's mercy, but at the same time, they also speak of his wrath, because of the fact that God says that that punishment in the hereafter, if that is true, if that's going to take place, then you will see a small glimpse of that in this world as well, so that that eternal punishment, or the punishment in the hereafter, you don't forget it, you don't lose sight of it. So it's just a question of, I think, reading the scriptures with this law in the background.
Okay, thank you so much. It's much clear now. Okay, so my second question is also linked to the first. So when I accepted Christianity, actually I'm an author. So I was working on a novel and different books. So what I did is I put a lot of Christianity beliefs in it, and I even ended one with the concept of crucifixion and salvation in blood of Jesus. And on the second hand, I'm having contacts with a Jewish community because we're kind of family friends. So I would write worship songs, and some of them even for Messianic Jewish community. So what is it now? I really regret on doing it, but I just can't bring it back, or I can't cancel the content that I written or the songs that I wrote. And will I be held kind of accountable if they're still singing it, even if I made it pretty clear of my faith? And secondly, that it has been my desire to sing the worship songs, the Psalms, with them in Hebrew and English. But now that since I'm back in my religion and even kind of trying to preach it, we know that in our societies, people don't eye female singing quite good, and although it's worship singing or not. So what would be your suggestion about that?
Well, first of all, whatever you did in the past is something that is behind you now. I mean, if you think that you wrote something which you don't subscribe to any longer, as far as you yourself is concerned, I think you do stand clear. But if people are still doing something that you created, now it is, I mean, it's a matter between themselves and and God. So I don't think you need to feel any guilt for that, because you see, a person is what he is now or she is now. So whatever you did in the past, I mean, you have come a long way from that. And as far as worship songs are concerned, we also need to understand that as long as they don't have any element of polytheism in it, I mean, as you clearly mentioned, the Psalms, for example, you don't find any polytheistic semblance, even the semblance of polytheism in the Psalms. So singing the Psalms, for example, or maybe writing songs which are similar to the Psalms is absolutely perfectly okay, I would say, even now. And the last part that you said was that, yes, in our society, women, if they take up this task of singing, whether it's worship songs or whether it's non-worship songs, regardless, they are looked down upon. It's something which is culturally a stigma on a lady or a girl or a woman. Yes, that is a sad story, a sad fact. But as I said, you need to do what you can do best, and if you think that what you're doing is contributing for your own growth, and you're also doing something which is in line with God's likeness, and it's also something which is in line with your own conscience, then I think it's a question of weighing the alternatives that you have. And I would say that, I mean, it's perfectly okay if you continue with them. But yes, there are situations in which you might need to reconsider, not because the thing is wrong, but because the way it is perceived in the society is something which might cause some difficulty. So it's like a question of managing what the talent that you have, and also thinking how best you can put it to use.
Thank you so much. But as you said about that, the Psalms, they are monotheistic fully, especially the Psalms of David. But when in the Christian community, they are singing the Psalms, they are usually thinking of Jesus. As for example, the word Jesus' Hebrew name is Yeshua, that means salvation. And wherever the word is used in the Psalms, especially in the Psalms of David, they take it that actually David is addressing Yeshua, Prophet Jesus. So if I'm thinking with any messianic, but I'm having my own beliefs that I'm talking to God as my
Right.
Yeshua, not Jesus, but that person is taking Jesus. So will
Right.
it be wrong or?
No, it's not be wrong, because you see, you yourself have this, strong feeling that you're talking to God. You're not talking to Yeshua. You're not talking to Jesus at all. It's all a question of your intention. So if they are doing something which is contrary to what you are doing, let them do what they're doing. But if you're doing it by considering the fact that you are addressing God as your Lord in all these Psalms, it's perfectly okay. And in fact, there's nothing which could be better than that. When you're reading the Psalms, it comes to your own heart. They strike a chord in your own heart and mind, that it's such a beautiful prayer of help and support that you would like God to give you. So if in your mind you have God pictured that yes, you're addressing all these Psalms to Him, I find it to be the best possible option.
I think that was it for all of the questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem.
Okay.
Inshallah,
Thank you very
see you
much.